This book will be loved by both athletes and by who hate politics and by activists who hate sports. So won't you please join me in welcoming Dave Zirin.
What's my name, fool? Sports and resistance in the United States. Now, this book, just to make it clear in one sentence, is about times when radical politics found expression in the world of professional sports in the U.S. Now, but there is a tradition, and that's the case I make with this book, deeply hidden, of times when the struggles off the field exploded onto the field with absolutely electric consequences. Now, this tradition runs counter to the carnival of reaction that I think a lot of us see in sports who watch it on a day-in, day-out basis, whether that's for work or not, in this country. Now, I actually had a front row seat for this carnival of reaction just last month when I went to a Washington Nationals game. That's my home team. And I went because, big shock, I actually wanted to see a baseball game. But instead, what I was treated to was what the Nationals were calling Military Appreciation Night, or MAN. Wow, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, and war. That is a great evening if I ever heard one. Now, if, like me, you're one of the, 61% of the country who doesn't think that the troops in Iraq happen to be fighting for freedom right now, you find yourself in this stadium with absolutely no voice. You find yourself with no way to express yourself to the athletic industrial complex. Okay, now, there are really no words for the storm that this caused when Cassius Clay changed his name. I mean, the heavyweight champion of the world in this country in the 60s, when boxing was arguably the biggest sport in the United States, the champion was the symbol of Americana, red, white, and blue, strength, power, aggression, all of these things. And all of a sudden, you had the heavyweight champion of the world, first of all, talking about how pretty he was, which shocked people, in and of itself, but then joining the organization of Malcolm X, joining an organization in the Nation of Islam that unabashedly believed in self-defense for people fighting in the South in the Civil Rights Movement. And the mobbed-up, corrupt, right-wing fight world absolutely lost their minds. But what was incredible about that time was overnight, the name became so seminal to the 60s, because whether or not you called the champion Clay or Ali, it said everything about you. It said what side you were on in the black freedom struggle, what side you were on in the free speech movements breaking out on campuses, soon the war in Vietnam as well. It was an incredible thing. And the pre-fight hype, Patterson, this is what he said to reporters. This is a direct quote. He said, "This fight is a crusade to reclaim the title from the black Muslims. As a Catholic, I am fighting Clay. And yes, his name is Clay, as a patriotic duty to return the crown to America." Now, Ali's response to this just shocked reporters because he had no response at all. I mean, this was the man they called Louisville Lip, Gaseous Cassius, Cash the Brash, and he had nothing to say in response to this. He just let it simmer, and then he did his talking in the ring. 9 rounds against Patterson, he just took him apart, and as he was jabbing at Patterson, he yelled out so everyone in press row could hear. He said, "Come on, America, come on, white America, say my name. Is my name Clay? What's my name, fool?" And that's where I get the title of the book. And that's just the title, so it's a good book. That took place in Alabama, where you had a group of African-American activists in SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, basically the youth wing of the Civil Rights Movement. They were organizing a group there called the Lowndes County Freedom Party. They were trying to register the poorest of the poor African-American voters in Alabama, sharecroppers, people who worked in factories down there. And they're famous in sort of the annals of the Civil Rights Movement because they were the first people to ever use the symbol of a Black Panther. And Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in California, they used that as an inspiration to call themselves the Black Panthers. That's something people who know the history of the Civil Rights Movement know. Oh yeah, that's where they had the symbol of the Black Panther in Alabama. But what a lot of people don't know is that their slogan that they had emblazoned underneath the Black Panther was, "We are the greatest." When they took the Ali, "I am the greatest," and put a big plural on the front of that. Another example is Martin Luther King, when he came out against the Vietnam War in 1967. This is something that's generally talked about with King in general discussion, but it's not remembered the degree of pressure and criticism he received for doing it at the time. Not just from the mainstream media, but also from the established civil rights movement who thought that King shouldn't be speaking out about international affairs of war. When King gave his first press conference to actually speak about the war in Vietnam, he said in his remarks, like Muhammad Ali tells us, we are all victims of the same system of injustice and oppression. Like incorporating Muhammad Ali's name to explain why he's coming out against the war. That to me is incredible. Is trying to reclaim that history and learn about the fire underneath the icons. I want to give some examples of that, sort of like the history that we know and then the history that we're not told. Like, for example, it's well known that Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion of the world, winning the title in 1908. But do we know that when he defended the title successfully against Jim Jeffords, who was called the Great White Hope, his defeat of Jeffords actually started the greatest race riot this country had ever seen and ever would see until the 1968 King assassination. The character of these riots were white mobs incensed at Johnson's victory, attempting to enter black neighborhoods and black communities defending themselves by force. After a boxing match, this occurred in 1910. I mean, and just to continue that, just to show how, like, what happens off the field or out of the ring influences what's in the ring, Booker T. Washington, who was just outraged, incensed, conservative, black leader at the time, went to Johnson and demanded that he condemn people for rioting. And Johnson said, you can kiss my... Oh, I can't say that because it's on TV, but Johnson responded, you can kiss my black ass, is what Johnson said in response. I just got the okay from C-SPAN. To answer the first question, though, if I am taking steroids, there's a doctor who's going to get sued pretty damn quick, I'll tell you that. The second part, though, the Pat Tillman story is to me like almost overbearingly, overwhelmingly tragic, and it's one that I think is worth reviving and talking about, especially given what Cindy Sheehan is doing right now in Texas. I mean, it's one of those things where you say never let anybody tell you that one person can't make a difference. I mean, if they're willing to actually get out there and put themselves on the line. And, I mean, the connection with Cindy Sheehan has to do with Pat Tillman's parents. People know the story of Pat Tillman. I'm going to assume they do. He's turned down millions of dollars in the NFL. He joined the Army Rangers. We got the big nationally... He was killed in Afghanistan. There was a nationally televised funeral that John McCain, another quote-unquote political luminary, spoke at. Bush even spoke on the Jumbotron at the Arizona Stadium, where he played during the election season to address the fans as everybody cheered and they flew the Blue Angels, USA, USA. The only problem with it was that it was a total, unequivocal, and disgusting lie, because Pat Tillman actually died at the hands of his own troops, and how that occurred is still something that's very unknown, and because they burned all the evidence at the time, claiming that it was a biohazard, which is actually not true. I looked it up because I had all these people email me after I wrote about it saying, you don't understand military law, man. They had to burn the evidence. I was like, great. Love the laptop commandos, like with their, But what makes the story so just like relentlessly disgusting was the fact that Pat Tillman's parents were not told that he died in this matter. Pat Tillman's brother, who was in his platoon, who he went to the Rangers with, was not told. And they were left at the funeral basically being used as props. So people ask, what did Pat Tillman actually die for? I mean, in the literal sense, he died for PR for this war. And it's also not a coincidence at all that they needed to sell his death as heroic, because it came out the same week as Abu Ghraib and the scandal there. They needed that story. They needed a hero, and they needed someone in Pat Tillman who couldn't turn them down as he did when he was a live soldier and say, I'm not going to do your ads, I just want to be a soldier, whatever. Whether you agree or disagree with what Pat Tillman did, the point is that they ruthlessly exploited him in death. And his parents, Pat and Mary Sr., after they heard this, they're both known very quiet people, very conservative people. They're divorced couple. They spoke out jointly about this. They condemned Bush. They condemned the war. They condemned just the entire charade that their family was put through. And then they immediately got quiet again. I was really hoping that they would use that as an opportunity. But two things happened that I thought were a shame. One was that because this story really did get relegated to the sports section, you didn't see, like, the anti-war movement, the left, actually go to the Tillmans and be like, let's get your story out there. Let's talk about it because it exposes how sick this system is, which is something I would argue should have happened. And the second thing, but what I'm hoping now is, like, with what Cindy Sheehan is doing, that it's going to give confidence and courage, not just to the Tillmans, but to everybody who's lost a family member in this disgusting war, and that includes Iraqis as well, to actually get out there and have their story heard. industry where politics is a dirty word. I mean, it's a bad thing at my job if you're political, to be political. And I think that's because people view politics as what the two ugly white guys with the bad haircuts do on C-SPAN, and not politics as what we live and breathe every single day. And that is politics. Politics are in art, politics are in culture, and politics are in sports. And we should not walk away from that political arena. We should jump in it with 2 feet, have out the fights, and get a new generation of people pissed off at the system, and get them to not burn up the cars after Syracuse wins the championship, but go out there and raise some hell about this war and about this world. Thank you.